G'day everyone, welcome to another video by myself, Andrew DFT. Now of course you can tell by the title that this is the part 2 to the Star Wars clone DC-15 standard blaster rifle tutorial. That right there was a bit of a mouthful, but moving on. So of course in part 1 we constructed the main interior of the bulk of this gun. Now in part 2 we're going to go off and we're going to build the front extended barrel and the under bipod section. Now these are the most difficult-ish parts of this entire build. Not that the gun is hard to build by any means, but this is the more difficult section than this part. So it will take your time and just some patience and some careful thinking before you actually apply the steps that you see in my video. But we'll just jump straight in and continue the build. Okay, so now it's time for the second half of the gun, the main barrel. What you can do is you can grab a nice cardboard tube or whatever you've got around the house, something cheap of course, and then draw up the length compared to the template. Any additional excess you can just simply cut off once you've established where it should end. Then what you can do with the cutoff is simply transfer it onto foam using the internal negative spacing to create two new foam circles. These are going to be plugs, so to speak, for the barrel, which will go on both sides and help stick the gun to the actual core body of the foam. So all you need to do once you've got those two circles cut out is simply apply a lot of hot glue into the interior side of the barrel and then push those in. You want to make sure that they sit flush up the top, so do be careful not to push them all the way through. Once you've got that sorted, you can then make a long strip of foam, more than enough to wrap around the cardboard, and put in these three individual segments. How did I get the thicknesses of those segments? Well, I just pretty much drew it up compared to the actual template as you just saw. Then what you're going to do is run some heat through it so that way it's malleable and it will bend easier, otherwise it would be a bit stiff, and you're simply going to slowly glue everything around and wrap it until it sets. Once it's completely set, you can close it off by cutting where it's necessary and gluing the seams together. Do make sure that all these wrap around quite horizontally and vertically, so that way they are evenly spaced and that all the seam lines are pretty much identical on one side. This will act as the bottom of the gun because you'll never actually see those lines. Then you're going to grab a larger piece of foam done to the same length as the current piece you're seeing on screen marked with those points, and you're going to draw on 8 lines, 8 new spaces. You can then break them into twos, because what we're going to do is we're going to make these a bit thinner, half as thin, so to speak. So adding that depth line into all these individual sections of 2 and trimming them in half, discarding the textured piece because you don't really need that. So that way it should leave us with all these segments. I think there should be 4 with 8 individual parts. Once those are cut in half, you can then cut all those free, so you should have these nice 8 long pieces of foam. Then what you're going to do is simply and very carefully go through and glue them in. Make sure that you mark a vertical line along the length of the barrel, so at least you know you're getting these straight, and then slowly take your time and paste them around evenly, trying to get the spaces perfect, so that way you shouldn't run into any issues later on. And then simply spin it around, make sure you've got it all sussed, and as you can see, it all sits in there relatively nice. If you do have some overhang, and I'm expecting you might, just simply trim those off and make it flush, and then go ahead and apply a lot of glue to all those individual segments as well as the main plug, so to speak, of the foam, and glue it into position, and making sure that it sits straight, and hold it there for some time, and don't grab it by the barrel until it's 100% set. That could take up to 20 minutes. So in that 20 minutes, you can go ahead and work on the bipod. So what we'll do is we'll grab the template and simply add in these additional lines you can see marked here. This is going to go towards the end of the bipod template to allow us to create a new one from foam. Once we've got that foam one, you can then flip it to make a second, so there's where you should have a left and a right. Now you're going to make these 3 little squares, all of them, an inch high and a 3/4 inch thick, and with one of them you're going to cut them into 3 stages like that. What we're then going to do is slowly put these into position. These will act as the middle brackets that hold the rail system together. Just simply glue them in where I'm showing you now to keep them all well paced. Because they are the same thickness and same size, you shouldn't have any inconsistencies. They should all just slot in perfectly. Now what we are going to do is with the end piece, the one that is closest to the trigger, we want this to be elevated a bit. So we're going to put this in like so, with the top protruding part going into the bottom of the gun. That way it raises it. Wait till the end of the video for me to assemble it so you get a better idea of what that means. But once I've got those all set, I can then glue in the other sides, and that way the rail of the bipod is starting to look more complete. But it's not finished. We do need to add a tiny segment that sits here at the end. As you'll notice, it's kind of empty at this point, so all you can do is grab a long piece of foam and simply cut it out where it should fit and then make it even thinner. We just want this really nice thin piece of foam to sit at the end here just to kind of close it off, as this is at the front piece. Nothing too difficult. Now we're going to quickly finish off the rest of the bipod by adding in this part of the detail. Simply grab the template, transfer it onto foam, flip one of the sides to make sure you have the two, the left and the right, and then at the front of the piece, not the back, the front where we literally just added in that finishing point, we're going to mark in where it should actually sit, so that way we can apply the glue or the contact adhesive of your choice and simply slot it into position. The corners should meet up at the front, so that way you shouldn't have any issue trying to align it. Then once you've got both of them stuck in, we can actually go ahead and finish this off by adding all the individual bindings. So to do that, all we're simply going to do is grab a long piece of foam, like we did with the other piece, measure out the distance between the two, and then cut it off and just slot it in. You don't need to make this any thinner because you won't ever see this piece because it's literally hiding underneath everything at the base of the gun. Now this little tiny piece I'm doing now is optional. You don't have to do it, I just did it for a bit more stability in the prop. All I did is cut a tiny little piece of foam, it's literally minuscule, and slot it into the second or middle bracket, so to speak. So that way it offers a bit of support when you actually want to hold this, so that way the bipod doesn't push up against the barrel. It should act as a barrier between that and hold everything in place. So once you've glued it in, it should look pretty fantastic like that. Now don't worry, we're nearly there. All we need to do is add in a finger guard and a trigger. So simply by grabbing the template, you can do that by making two pieces of foam, being sure to flip one, so that way we can simply glue them into position. Do make sure that you cut them reasonably flush, so that way you don't have any inconsistencies along the seam line. If you do, you can cover that up later on using a clay method, but once you've got it, simply glue it into position. It should slot in pretty damn well based on the template, as long as you haven't altered that of any kind, and then you can simply draw up a trigger of your choice. So I haven't done one in the template, so you'll have to make one up, but a lot of people like to have different designs. I just went with a very simple and I guess obscure looking piece, and then added a depth line about 90% through the foam just to get rid of that textured side by trimming it off, and then gluing it into position, giving me that nice final touch. Now to finish it off, all you're going to do is grab the heat gun and give it some heat to the whole entire design, especially the piece that we scored before, just to give it a bit of detail. Being sure to keep the heat gun moving so that way you don't burn anything, and especially watch out when you're going over the thinner foam so it doesn't deform and come up. So that's it. You now have it looking like this, well hopefully like this, and you're ready to take it to the next step outside of this tutorial by customizing, adding additional features, adding more detail, and then of course painting it up how you wish. You can have a nice fresh off the line prop, or you can have a very grunged, mud-filled, dirty end of the Clone Wars battle era version. Up to you. But remember that this is a basic one, so it is now up to you to take that extra step and add in some additional features. So I just want to say thank you for enjoying the part 2 videos and building along with me. If you want to see other props done in this tutorial style, let me know in the comments below. I do have a lot to do this year, so I'll definitely check it out and hopefully add it to that line. And like I mentioned in part 1, I will have a tutorial out, a web series for the Clone Scout Bark Trooper, as it is a pretty cool and easy build and all of you actually want it. Otherwise, give the video a thumbs up if you actually enjoyed the content, and if you haven't already, consider subscribing. I make a lot of cool content and there's a lot more to come. But of course, until the next video, catch you later.